Welcome back, my fellow samurai, to the Ghost of Tsushima Yotei Gamecast. I'm your host, Andrew Zink, and I'm welcoming you back for episode 23, Iki Island DLC, Memories of Kazumasa. Yeah, I'm really excited to do this episode, and, this may not be a particularly long episode, but, I felt like the memories of Kazumasa that you can get on Iki Island, I really felt like they needed their own episode because they really spoke to me. I mean, I feel like they tell you a lot about Jin as a character. They kind of give some just invaluable backstory about Kazumasa, about things about Jin's family. There's just a lot in there that you don't get anywhere else in the game. And yeah, I just figured, hey, I'll just make a separate episode for it. So that's what I decided to do here. I think it's really important, and I really enjoyed doing these memories. Again, they were really impactful, and just everything about them. The music, the lighting, and everything was just really well done. So yeah, we'll just dive right in. So there's 5 memories in total, and if anybody's listening to this who haven't discovered the memories of Kazumasa while playing Iki Island, you gotta do it. You really gotta do it. They're random locations around the map that you can find. There is no quest. There is no quest marker that will lead you to them. You just have to find the locations on the map, and they're undiscovered locations until you clear the fog of war, you come across them or something. So yeah, they're all marked by torn Sakai banners, and they all have a white tree with a deer sitting underneath it, and you basically walk up to the banner and then press the right trigger to start the memory. All right, so there's 5 in total. The first one is called Memory of Foreboding. And yeah, in each of these, there's no combat. You just kind of walk and talk in each of them. They're not super long. So in the Memory of Foreboding, and one last thing I want to say, actually, there's 4 of these you have to do before you unlock a 5th one. You can do, if I remember correctly, I think you can do them in any order, but I'm just doing them in, the order I want to do here. So for the first one is the Memory of Foreboding, and it takes place in the location Tatsu's Ladder on the eastern coast of Yahata Prefecture. And this is at the mouth of the main river there on the north bank. And so this is right on the ocean. And it's next to the remains of this old wrecked ship. At this point, it's kind of like the skeleton of the ship. And, it's so hollowed out that you can just walk in it, basically. So when Jin arrives and you start the memory, before the flashback begins, Jin says his father's forces made their initial camp here at this spot. So yeah, just right away, I thought this was really cool that it's that these quests, that these memories are going to take you back to the exact locations of some of the significant moments of the samurai invasion of Iki Island 15 years ago. And just to relive that, I was just in a really emotional, heartfelt way, really excited just to see what that was like. So then the flashback begins. So it starts and Jin is playing the flute in the belly of this ship's skeleton. It's right there. So he's approached by a soldier who says Kazumasa is addressing the men, and he tells you to gather your armor. So you basically, run up this small hill to your tent on the coast at the invasion landing spot with this one samurai. And on the way, you pass by, Sakai soldiers, they're at campfires, there's supplies around, it very much looks like an invading army. And the fires are giving off these super bright embers that fly into the sky. And it's already giving you this very, this kind of very dark, foreboding sense of what is to come. It almost looks like a war zone, buildings that are burning already. And I guess that's why it could be called the Memory of Foreboding. They do a great job with the atmosphere there. So yeah, eventually you reach your armor, and it's on an armor stand, and then you put it on. And so then it cuts to young Jin, who's wearing the armor, and Kazumasa's speech is beginning on the beach to his soldiers. So as you're walking to him, you hear him saying that the people of Iki consider themselves masters of the island and lords of the sea. And then he calls them rats and says that they're greedy, vicious, disease-ridden rats. And then he says, and we have found their nest. So I believe he's talking about Kitafura village here, which, we've been over in the podcast before, but that's the location where eventually the samurai massacre, pretty much all of the civilians living there in just a horrific, display of terror that really, you could say Iki Island really never recovers from and scars the population, and it scars Jin, and you're going to see that as these memories go on. And again, it just says a lot about how Kazumasa and the samurai look at the Japanese people of Iki Island, and calling them like greedy, vicious, disease-ridden rats, it's really, and I've talked a lot about just the class differences that exist between Shimura and Yuna and just various people, samurai and farmers, and you're really seeing that here, how much they really look down on the people of Iki and they're demeaning them in the language here. So eventually you arrive at the top of the camp to talk with Kazumasa at his tent, and so there's soldiers gathered around. So you kind of realize that these are generals. He's talking to his commanders in the army. So he's talking to the generals, and he's saying that every one of their warriors owes each of their, generals 5 heads, and that each general owes him, Kazumasa, 50 heads each, and if they gather anything less, they can swim home. So right away, it's, he's setting the scene for just what a brutal campaign this is about to be. And you're really seeing that. And so what's really cool about this is you're getting the sense that they're going to walk you through the entire invasion from start to finish, which is just a really cool thing to do. So he then tells them all to ready their men to march to Mount Takanatsuji. And presumably this is to build Fort Sakai, which of course stands for the next 15 years and you reclaim with the raiders during the Iki Island DLC main storyline. So then the speech ends and you start walking with him to a fire nearby so he can look at your armor and inspect it. So when you get there, he inspects Jin's armor and he says that he critiques it and says that the shoulder pad is loose. And he basically shames Jin for just not doing it right. And so he then says, to never leave his side while they're on campaign. And Jin says, that Kazumasa wishes he hadn't come. And all Kazumasa says is, you're here now. He doesn't even try and deny it. And then he says, to pay attention to him, use this campaign for Jin to sharpen his skills and to make his father proud. And that's the end of the memory. And so then, it cuts back to Jin on the beach at this spot. And Jin says to himself, but also to his father, did I make you proud, father? And that is the end of the memory of foreboding. Yeah, so right away, I felt just super impacted by all of this. You kind of are seeing right away why the people of Iki Island are calling Kazumasa the Butcher of Iki. This is definitely not like someone who seems super kind-hearted. He seems like a very hardened type of not only warrior, but father towards Jin. And you definitely get the sense, and I just want to be clear, Jin must be like 14 or 15 in this memory and in all these memories during this campaign. So Jin is not thrilled to be here. Jin is not some sort of bloodthirsty child who is like eager for battle. He definitely seems ambivalent just about some of this. And again, this memory starts with Jin playing the flute. Like they're all in their armor getting ready for battle and preparing for the invasion, and Jin is on the beach playing his flute. So it kind of gives you a sense of just who they are coming into this campaign. And I did really, really like this first memory. I think it was really cool that they're, hinting at Kitafura village, at what's to come. They're kind of referencing indirectly Fort Sakai, and it's just, again, really cool to see like the foundations of all the things that would shape Iki Island for the next 15 years and coming decades, and you're like flashing back in time and seeing that firsthand. I just think it's really cool. All right, so the next memory is called The Memory of Sorrow, and it takes place at the Thunderhead Cliffs in the northeastern part of the Yahata Prefecture. So this is the very northeastern corner of the island. So you arrive at this cliffside old camp, and you can see there's like, remnants of this old camp that have kind of just decayed. So when you approach the Sakai banner, and it truly looks out over the ocean, it's a very beautiful spot, but you can also feel how somber it is in that moment. When you approach the Sakai banner and, click on it, Jin says that this is the first place he ever had his first sake. So then the memory starts. So Jin and Kazumasa are in their casual robes, and they're sitting by a campfire in this exact spot, and it's just the two of them. And Kazumasa tells Jin, in the memory, he walks up to Jin and says that they're out of sake, and he tells Jin to go get more from the men. So they're sitting at the top of these cliffs, and you kind of have to like run down around the side of this top cliff to this camp that's this campfire and tents that are just below it. And so as you go, you pass Lord Adachi, actually. So I thought this was really cool. And again, his full name is Harunobu Adachi. So you pass Harunobu Adachi at a fire that's like not next to Lord Sakai, or not next to Kazumasa Sakai's, but kind of close. It's like in between the lower level campfire and the upper level campfire, and I'll get to that in a second. And yeah, as you pass Lord Adachi, he tells you not to go far, and Jin makes him laugh by saying he doesn't need a nursemaid, and then they have a little bit of banter, and they both like laugh to each other. And again, I really liked this because you actually are seeing Lord Adachi in, like real time in this way, as opposed to like he dies at the very beginning, an introduction of Ghost of Tsushima, so you never really get to know that much about him. Lady Masako Adachi obviously talks about him a bit, but it's kind of cool to see him in the flesh in these memories. So yeah, eventually you arrive to this lower level, this camp below where Kazumasa's fire is, and the samurai are singing and they're drinking at a fire and they're celebrating a victory. Presumably it's over Kitafura village, and they're like back at camp after that, but it could be a different victory that we just don't know about. And so they say that the raiders are calling Kazumasa the Butcher of Iki. They're all very happy about this, and they say that it's a very fitting legend. And so Jin, asks for the sake, and eventually the samurai who's talking, he tells Jin that he can take this one. He hands him a bottle, and he says that the raiders don't need it anymore because they're dead. And yeah, that's the end of that conversation. But wow, yeah, I mean, they're really showing what it's like to be on, the victor's side here so far. And so from the first memory to the second one, some sort of battle has taken place. The samurai have won, which isn't a huge surprise if you think about it, when they villainize the raiders of Iki. The raiders of Iki are just poor civilians who have no means of economic advancement and probably don't have that many means of industrial manufacturing. So the samurai are showing up in full armor, with high quality weapons, melee and ranged, up against, these raiders. So they're not going to have that much armor or weapons. Like their quality of armor and weapons are not going to match up to the samurai. So it's just really interesting that they're like in these memories moving you along as the campaign progresses, and you're kind of in that in Jin's shoes. So that's really cool. And and then so you take the sake and you return to Kazumasa up above, and then you sit and you take a drink with him to victory. And this is the first time you're kind of seeing Kazumasa not in his armor. Like, he's in more of a relaxed state. It's nighttime, you're sitting around the campfire, everyone's drinking, you know. And Jin asks why they aren't drinking with the soldiers below. And Kazumasa says that a lord must set boundaries with the men because familiarity breeds a lack of discipline. And Jin is confused because he says, you know, these men are laying down their lives for us and our cause. But Kazumasa says it's their duty to do so, just as it's his own duty to do that for his Jito. And of course, he's referencing Lord Shimura there. And then, yeah, you know, I'll have a couple notes on this in just a second. But then he actually starts talking about Jin's mom. And he says her name. Her name is Chiyoko. And this is super significant to me because, as far as I know, you never hear we never find out what Jin's mom's name is throughout the whole game. And as far as I know, this is the only time in any of the lore that his mom's name is said out loud or ever referenced. So for me, that was super important just to know, you know, what his mom's name is. So yeah, and so Kazumasa says that, you know, Jin's mom, Chiyoko, and he discuss these matters often and that he relies on her counsel. And then Jin says that he wishes he remembered her better. And so they're telling you that by this point she's passed away. And Kazumasa says that she was kind, intelligent, and that losing her was like losing the best part of himself. And Jin mentions, you know, the flute is the only thing of hers he still has. And Kazumasa asks Jin to play it. So then Jin does, and it's just, you know, this nice melody. It's kind of the same one that you have for a lot of the game, unless you choose to switch it. And then that's the end of the memory. And, you know, when Jin, you know, comes back to it in real life, in, you know, the modern time, he says that that was the first time he had ever asked to hear Jin play his flute. And it was the first time he ever felt like your son. And so he's like, again, Jin, it's as if Jin is like talking to his dad as if he's there. And that's the end of, that is the end of the Memory of Sorrow. Yeah, so again, just another one. It's short, but I find it to be super impactful and it tells you a lot. I mean, just from start to finish, just a couple quick things. I mean, you know, it's cool to see Lord Adachi. And it's showing how, you know, the Adachi clan and the Sakai clan have, you know, they have a bond. And that, you know, Harunobu Adachi and Jin, like, really do have a bond. And Harunobu has known Jin since he was little. And so that's just cool to see. And then, yeah, you're really seeing the differences in class and how, like, rigidly Kazumasa feels about, you know, like, what you could call fraternizing. I mean, he really... He very strictly feels like, you know, I'm the Lord and they're the soldiers and they're in like a lower class than me, and so they follow me, and that's how things go. And this is reflected, this is kind of symbolized by the camp locations. That's kind of why I wanted to point that out. Like, Kazumasa's camp is at the top of the cliff with the best view, and he's like alone up there. And then you have Lord Adachi's camp, and Lord Adachi clearly serves as like the second in command to Lord Sakai. And then so his camp is like close to it, but not like there being like friendly with him. And then down below, you have the camp of the regular soldiers. So you're seeing the class differences there. And, you know, I've talked about this throughout this podcast, but then even Jin as a teenager, you're seeing the difference in their ideology and their approach because Jin really has a more populist sense of things. Jin is saying, like, these men are sacrificing their lives for our cause and we should be giving them attention. We should be celebrating together. We should be socializing with them. And Kazumasa just says, like, familiarity breeds a lack of discipline. So we need boundaries. And it's just like this very rigid, stiff, kind of emotionless approach. And yeah, it's just giving you a real insight into Kazumasa's character. But then you see Kazumasa soften when talking about Chiyoko. And I thought it was really significant that he said that he relies on her counsel. Because obviously, you know, throughout history, there are many times where women are playing very significant roles and they often aren't recognized for it. And there's some times where, for men who are leaders of nations or certain entities, they wouldn't always include they wouldn't always include women or their partners in strategy. And it's really notable that Kazumasa has been doing that. So it is interesting because you could, and maybe I'm reading a little too far into this, but the fact that Jin has so much respect for Yuna, for Masako Adachi, and he doesn't just view Yuna and Masako in the base game. He doesn't just view them as soldiers. He treats them as equals. And that's really interesting because in this one way that we see, it seems like that's how he treats Chiyoko. Like, he really is treating her as an intellectual equal. And so it's important because it shows you that Jin kind of grew up around that. So, yeah, I think that's kind of a redeeming quality we see about Kazumasa, which is just really interesting. It's really adding to the complexity of him as a character here. And then, yeah, they talk about her and just like, and you've heard this mentioned throughout the game a couple times, but I feel like this was the most explicit conversation you've had where you see it between Jin and Kazumasa, just the impact of Chiyoko's death from illness, just how much it affected their family. And the fact that Kazumasa says losing her was like losing the best part of myself. I mean, wow, that is just an incredibly, heavy, sad, emotional thing to say. And especially on the, after you, presumably, if this is after the Kitafura village massacre, it just makes you wonder if maybe Kazumasa was hardened by that loss, and maybe if she'd been around, some of these things may have gone differently, which is incredibly significant to consider. So, yeah, to me, just, again, very significant memory, and really stood out to me. So the next memory we're going to move on to is the Memory of Anguish. And this takes place at the northern edge of Kitafura Battleground by a tree with white leaves. So it's east of the nearby cat sanctuary. So Jin remembers the battlefield. And, when you start the memory, he says he remembered the battlefield and that he tried to forget this place. So then, the memory starts. And it's young Jin, and he's kneeling over a body when Harunobu Adachi comes up and he asks Jin if he's okay. Jin's in full armor. You're on the Kitafura battleground in the flashback. And Jin says this doesn't feel like victory. So then they start walking to rejoin the main army at the center of the battleground. And Jin asks if this is how it's supposed to feel. And Lord Adachi says victories don't have to feel good. And you walk down a hill across the battlefield. You start approaching the main army. You see lots of campfires, and you see like some burning villages in the background. And then you see the army standing with civilians as prisoners around. Kazumasa is giving a speech to the invading samurai soldiers about how, they sent a message with this victory and, blah, 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 blah. And so when Jin arrives, he interrupts Kazumasa and objects. And he says that they were unarmed villagers. And Kazumasa tells Jin to stop so that they can talk in private. And then he also tells Lord Adachi to feed the men and get them drunk. So again, it's interesting because it's showing you that Lord Adachi was the second in command here and just the type of trust that he had in him. So then you walk off with Kazumasa and Jin asks what happened today, And he's like, Jin clearly seems very shaken and very upset by what has happened. And Kazumasa says that the villagers were helping to hide the raiders. He says it very accusatorily. And so then you pass by, you're walking by some villagers on their knees as samurai stand over them. The villagers look helpless. The samurai are fully armed, like they could just execute the villagers at any moment. Very, very heavy scene. And Jin says that, they butchered the villagers. But Kazumasa says, well, they attacked us. And Jin is then upset by the fact that he killed someone. And he reveals, like, that man I killed earlier, and he seems, like he's struggling with it. And Kazumasa says that Jin did well, and that he did better than he expected he would. And he tells Jin that he should be proud, and that is the end of the memory. And then when you come back to real life, Jin says, "If you were here today, Father, would you condone my actions so freely?" Yeah, so I feel like not as much to analyze in this memory, but it is just incredibly. I mean, you're seeing Jin at his first real battle. You're seeing the aftermath of it. I mean, you see how just terrifying the samurai look to the villagers. I mean, they have just rolled up and massacred this place. And again, like, how do you think that would leave people feeling about you in the long term? Like the whole legacy of hatred towards the Sakai family and clan from the people of Iki, like, you're seeing it happen in real time in these memories, and that's just like a really crazy thing to see. And yeah, and you can just see that, Kazumasa is trying to mold Jin in his image here, and Jin is changing, but it's not like he kills one person and he's like, "Oh, this is easy." Like, yeah, screw these people. Like, Jin is clearly not okay with how all this goes. All right, so now we'll move on to the fourth memory, which is the memory of kinship. And this is found on the northern edge of Senjo Gorge. So again, super gorgeous location with the purple wisteria around. And so Jin says that his father died not far from here in this canyon as you approach the banner, and then you start the memory. So the memory starts, and it's Jin telling Harunobu Adachi that he cheated at an archery challenge. And Adachi says that Jin owes him 20 mon. And so it's kind of a comical scene. They've got a target up, and there's like some arrows in it, and Jin says, like, "I don't know how, but you cheated." And it is just comical. So then you run back to the main camp in Senjo Gorge. You're passing by these beautiful wisteria trees everywhere. Senjo Gorge might be my favorite location in the whole game, DLC and game. I mean, it's just crazy how beautiful it is. And Jin tells him that Jin says to Adachi that he was taught that a debt owed to swindlers is not to be honored. And Adachi says he was taught that there's no shame in admitting defeat by a superior opponent. So yeah, they're having some good banter here and, exchanging, samurai ideology. And so then you get back to the main camp, and Kazumasa is telling the soldiers that they have one final fight to finish, and then they can leave Iki Island. And he calls it a stinking island. He says, "We can leave this stinking island." So again, just showing that they have a very demeaning approach, or like perception of Iki Island and the people who live there. So as you approach, Kazumasa, the last thing he says is, "Lord Shimura's stewards can collect taxes and tend the manure fields." So that's interesting, and they'll get to more of this in a second. So then you talk to him. And Kazumasa and Jin go walking, and Jin asks why Kazumasa wouldn't want to stay and bring Iki Island under their control. In which case he says that Omi Village and the battlefield are his homes, and that's just not his place. And he then asks if Jin would stay and rule this place. And Jin then says, "I thought I would, but after everything we've been through, I feel more alive in battle than any other place." And this pleases Kazumasa. He kind of laughs, and he says, "You are a Sakai." And, Jin asks what he means, and he says, "Let the Shimuras of the world keep records and manage castles." He says, "We are the lightning in the storm, the avalanche that topples a mountain. That is Clan Sakai." And he then says that he once judged Jin as soft and unfit, but their time together has given him... And then they're interrupted. And they're interrupted by a scout bringing urgent news. And presumably it's of, the battle at Senjo Gorge that is about to begin, where Kazumasa will lose his life. And of course, you see just how sad this is because it feels like Jin, for the first time, is about to get a certain level of care and attention from his father that he just hasn't really ever gotten before. And then they get interrupted by what will be the beginning of the battle. And, presumably the last time that Jin sees his father, before the death memory that you see throughout the main game. And Kazumasa says to Jin to follow his lead and that everything will be fine. And that is the end of the memory. And Jin, when Jin comes back to the modern day, he wonders what Kazumasa was going to say. And he says, what did our time together give you? I've often guessed, but I will never know. And that's the end of it. So again, just really, really impactful. And just these short memories, you're seeing how this campaign has progressed, how for the first time Jin and Kazumasa have kind of grown closer. And you're really seeing Kazumasa's view on life in this, where I thought it was really just like, it says a lot how he looks at like Lord Shimura as like a bureaucrat, and he's just like, that's not me. And he has this very rigid code around what Clan Sakai is. And I actually really, it was kind of like epic what he was saying, that Clan Sakai is the lightning in the storm, the avalanche that topples a mountain. And you can see why Clan Sakai under Kazumasa's leadership, and maybe, whoever came before Kazumasa, why they attained a status as like samurai nobility event, essentially. Because, I mean, they really are an elite force, basically. And if you remember, Tenzo says that, it took dozens of raiders to bring down Kazumasa. And so, if you're Lord Shimura, someone like Kazumasa and the Sakai clan, they're immensely valuable to you. I mean, they are your enforcers, basically. Whatever rules and decisions you make, they are the ones who will enforce it and back it up for you and be your military might. So, and it's interesting how, at the start of this, Jin was really unsure about their role in that, and now he seems more certain after having had time in battle, and you're kind of seeing him mature into the person that he is in the game. So all that I think is just very interesting, and again, very incredibly sad that that Jin never gets that last moment with his father of just like what his father would say to him that seemed to be kind. And Jin didn't get that too much. So yeah, at this point, after you complete the memory of kinship, you will unlock the fifth and final memory of Kazumasa. And as I was doing this, I was so excited. And I just was like, what? I just thought this was so cool. And I just felt like, oh my God, one final new memory that just got unlocked. I was so curious what it was, and I just couldn't wait to see it. So the final memory is called The Memory of an Unfinished Song. And it takes place on the Survivor's Coast in the northwest of the island where you first arrive at the DLC. And so this memory, so you have to do all the first four, and then this one unlocks. And Jin will say, after you complete the fourth memory, Jin will say that he still feels troubled and that he should return to the last place he set foot on Iki Island 15 years ago. And that is the Survivor's Coast. And you'll see why in the memory. So you arrive, and when you reach the banner, Jin says that he held a vigil here after his father died. And it's at this overlooking the sea. And so then the memory starts, and Jin is in that same exact spot, and he's playing the flute in his casual robes. And a samurai approaches, and he says that the song is beautiful. He informs Jin that he's packed his belongings, but some of his father's belongings are missing. And so Jin says that he'll look for them. So then you head over to the beachside camp, and you find Chiyoko's poem and her calligraphy, and Jin comments how, Kazumasa probably heard it in her voice and just how nice it is to have that. You then read a Clan Sakai scroll that talks about the lightning and the avalanches again, and just how it defines who they are. And then you look at a broken blade and remember how Lord Shimura told Jin that Kazumasa broke it in a duel, And then he says, shocked by his strength, the Chikuzen rebels surrendered immediately. So again, just giving you a lot of backstory. And again, this is the first and, as far as I know, the only time in the whole game you ever hear about the Chikuzen rebels. I would have loved to I'm just eating up any lore I can find in this game, and yeah, that's all we get about them, but kind of just a cool mention there. And so then Lord Adachi approaches, and he says it's time to leave. And then a samurai walks up and says that their scouts are reporting raiders in the area. So then you start walking with Lord Adachi, and he says that he's sorry for Jin's loss. It's this very somber feeling. And he says that the people of Omi village are preparing Kazumasa's funeral back on Tsushima. And so as you're walking, you're kind of walking past injured soldiers, people with arrow wounds. Like, you can really feel the devastation that has been wrought upon the samurai invading force at this point. And Lord Adachi says that he and his men will escort them home. And so then you arrive to this final spot on the beach where Jin says that he should have saved his father, but Lord Adachi says that the assassins would have killed him too, and that Clan Sakai must survive. And then a samurai approaches, and they say that a large group of raiders are approaching, and that they should leave, but that the boats aren't fully packed yet. And then Jin says to just leave the supplies because the lives of their people are more important. And then Lord Adachi says, you heard Lord Sakai, time to leave. And that is the end of the memory. And so then Jin wakes up, or, he comes back to the modern day. And he says, I ran from these memories for most of my life, but now after facing them, I think I understand you, Father. And then you actually, there's a deer that's standing there, and then you get a dialogue choice. And the dialogue choice is, you were trapped in your myth, and you were just a man. And you were trapped in your myth is Jin saying he tried to connect with him, but in the end, nothing got through Kazumasa's armor. And he says that he would always be a legendary warrior, chasing duty and burdened by the people who loved him. And then Jin says, I hope I don't repeat your mistakes. And that's really significant to me. And then you have this final moment where you have to do one of the really beautiful flute songs that you do at the animal sanctuaries. And it's the song from the very end of the game. And as you play, the deer approaches Jin the same way as in the animal sanctuaries. And it's just an incredibly beautiful moment and song, as it feels like Jin has maybe found some peace just through this, terribly difficult campaign that he went through, and just how these memories haunted his life essentially. And yeah, then with that, after you complete the song and pet the deer, that concludes the final memory. And then you receive the Tempest's End sword kit for your katana and Tanto dagger. So pretty cool. It's a pretty cool sword kit, I gotta say. And then I just thought that was a really just a really great finish for these memories. Where you're seeing how Lord Adachi brings them home, and they talk about the funeral, which of course we got that flashback in the main game. And I really feel very highly about these memories of Kazumasa. And from start to finish, it's they show you the beginning of this invasion, and then all the way to the end of the invasion, where the samurai are basically run off the island. And you wonder if his mother's poem, and if that dueling blade, and if some of these things that Jin was looking at, if those all got left behind. It's all those sentimental objects, because a large force of raiders was closing in on them, and they were outnumbered, not in a defensible position. So they just had to jump in their boats and basically just leave everything behind, and return to Tsushima and defeat. And just how cool it is that they're showing you all this. I just think it adds a ton to the story. It just adds a lot of characterization, builds out the world, and just really added a lot. So, and hey, if anybody's listening to this right now and you didn't play any of these, you got to go check them out. They're really good. So, hey, y'all. I hope you guys enjoyed, hope you enjoyed this episode. Hope you enjoyed playing through these memories. I certainly did. I've enjoyed talking about it. And this is episode 23. We'll have one more episode finishing up our Iki Island DLC content, and then we will be all done. Can't even believe it, but super excited to move ahead with Ghost of Yotei content and other stuff. So thanks for listening, and I will talk to y'all soon.